Hello, Jaime.
Well, how are you?
Good. Glad to see you. I was out last week.
Yes, I always forget to put these on my calendar.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I get the after emails. I'm like, oh no. But I've been meeting with local career coaches here in the Houston, Texas area
Yeah.
past couple, forever now. But they've been helpful with helping me land interviews and networking and all that. So
Oh,
it's only a
awesome.
matter of time. Yeah, I'm so happy and blessed that we have local recruiters here uh, giving advice and giving contacts. So.
That's great. That's great. Are you, remind me, you were part of the Never Search Alone community, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I haven't been reassigned or asked for a new one since, I don't know, May or April. So I've just been doing my stuff on my own here
Got it. Got it.
locally.
Okay. Hey, John.
I'm on mute. How are you?
Doing all right. Welcome back to town.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Um, so usually we have anywhere from like 15 to like, I think we had like 35 folks one week not too long ago. So we'll let some folks trickle in. Hello, Jess, Tom,
Hello.
Julian. Hello, welcome.
I'm eating, so I will join with the video after eating.
Did you bring some for all of us?
I wish I could share it virtually.
All right. Hello, Irene, Jancy.
Hey, how are you, Eric?
Good, good. If you guys are
Did
in a
we
place where
did
you
we
can turn
not
your
have
video on, I'd love to see your faces.
did
Way,
we not
hello.
have yeah, did we not have the meeting the week before last?
Yes, or correct. Last week I was out and I sent an email to everyone letting folks know, and I posted it on the Never Search Alone Slack random Slack channel as well. So
Oh,
hopefully you got that.
okay. I didn't get that and I was waiting and then there were a couple people that joined and I said I really don't know what happened.
Okay, yeah. I had to take a break last week, so
Oh,
um
that's
but I'm back. I'm back.
oh,
Steven, hello. Liza. If you guys are in a place where you can turn your video on, I would love to see you. We try to make this a bit more interactive. So um and I do this for you guys. So would love to kind of see you guys. I was out last week. We'll let folks trickle in, but I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I was out last week, down in southern Utah with the family, and it's nice to take a break every now and then. Which I would highly encourage a lot of you. I know you're all looking for your next opportunity. And at least for me, I know that when I step away from work, I get a little bit anxious, but the much needed break is really, if you can muster it, it's really rejuvenating. Um, so anyway, I'm back today, and today I was hoping to talk a little bit about this topic of games, quote unquote, that recruiters play, and how to identify some of these patterns in your job search and interview process. I think if you can start to identify some of these things, it can be really helpful. That way you, one, you know how to identify them, and two, you can have some sense of what might be happening, right? It's not always 100% predictive of what exactly is happening behind the scenes, but at least you can have some idea of what you might be considering or you might be looking for, and then also how to react to it, right? How to respond to what might be going on. So, for everyone that just joined, uh, any first timers here? Show of hands. Okay, awesome. Hey, John. Yeah, Shannon. Shannon. So, I started this weekly coffee with the recruiter session maybe 4 months ago. I've been working with a lot of job seekers, and what I've noticed is that there's a lack of insight into the recruiter mindset, lack of insight in terms of how um, hiring processes work, how incentive structures work, how recruiters work. And I felt like if there was just a little bit of understanding or insight into these areas, that it would help job seekers tremendously navigate their search, manage the interview processes, and really just, manage your expectations more effectively, right? Which can lead to managing, what could be a really frustrating uh, journey. So if there's opportunity to minimize that, that's what I'm trying to do with a little bit of insight here into the whole recruiting process. So I do this every week, typically about half an hour. Sometimes we go over, and usually it's structured as an AMA, just ask me anything. Based on some recent feedback that I've received, I've tried to add a little bit more structure around the conversation. I try to make it really interactive. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to go deeper into certain areas and share with you what I know. I don't have all the answers, but what I'm hoping that I could share with you is the insight or the unique perspective of a recruiter. I've been doing this now for 11 years, mostly with venture-backed startup and growth companies. And in a prior career life, I was in software product development, engineering, and product management. And so somehow I became a recruiter. So what I'll do is I'm going to share my screen here. I have a deck and we can kind of just fly through it. It's not anything fancy, but it's really just a prompt conversation. So I'll share my screen here and we'll go from there. Let's see. Can you guys see that slide deck, Coffee with a Recruiter? Yeah, okay, awesome. Thanks, Jaime. Okay, cool. So all right, so the games recruiters play, it was really kind of just a catchy way to kind of get people's attention. But and I don't mean for this to be like a bashing session for recruiters. There are sneaky games that recruiters can play, and I'm not trying to sort of focus on that. Although you should be aware when there are some of these games. That way you can either be aware of it and try to sort of exit the situation if need be. Um, so these games they're just common patterns that you may observe in your job search, right? And they might suggest what might be going on behind the scenes, right? And so we're going to go through, I have like 18 of these things in this deck. We're not going to cover all of them, but I tried to prioritize some of the ones that I was hoping to talk about. And then I'll leave some time towards the end to just sort of AMA about anything that's sort of outside of this deck. But if you have any questions that are relevant to this deck as we're going along, just just either shout it out, and if it gets unruly, we can just look, to put it in the chat. If you're more comfortable putting it in the chat, put it in the chat because I'll be looking at that as well. Okay. So goal is to share the patterns, what might be going on behind the scenes, and then how to respond. Um, these patterns or these games don't necessarily suggest ill intent on the recruiter's part, but it does sort of highlight incentive structures, right? And how the recruiter might be sort of managing their pipeline, their cohorts, their portfolio of either companies that they're working with, if they're a third-party recruiter, or the portfolio of requisitions that they may be responsible for. So I would avoid, if you determine that maybe a recruiter is playing a game, so to speak, I would avoid accusing anyone of playing games. That probably wouldn't go over well with anybody. And then just be careful not to over-index on any signals or patterns that you see here, right? The reason I'm sharing these patterns is to give you some insight of what might be happening. So it might provide you with some better guidance in terms of truth seeking, right? What questions you should be asking, right? You should also note that there are different make and models of recruiters, right? There's an internal recruiter, and they're internal recruiters, and in some cases, you might be working with an external recruiter, right? There's junior recruiters, there's more senior recruiters, right? I've mentioned this before. More junior recruiters tend to have less line of sight to the hiring authorities, whereas senior recruiters tend to have more line of sight. They've probably been around the block a bit longer. Perhaps they've been with the company a bit longer. So the senior recruiter typically has a bit more influence and insight than a junior recruiter, right? So get a sense of what kind of recruiter you're working with. Transactional versus a relationship oriented recruiter, right? You guys have probably all experienced, a taste of each of these areas. So just kind of want to remind you of that. Okay. So one game or one pattern that many of you have probably seen, especially in this sort of environment, is this idea of the ghosting game, right? Um, so I think I had this discussion in the past with either my job search counsel or um, it might have even been in one of these sessions, but the idea of ghosting, right? So ghosting is not applying and then you not hearing back. That's not what I'm qualifying as ghosting. Ghosting is when you've had an engagement with a person, either through email or through the phone or a Zoom call, and then they've led you to believe that something should happen next, and then you never hear from them. Okay, so that's my definition of ghosting. So in this situation, if you've had a positive interaction or communication, and then suddenly the recruiter just goes dark and you've never heard from them, here's what might be happening, right? Especially right now, there's cases where recruiters are just completely swamped. Recruiters are doing the job of multiple recruiters. Like a lot of companies are slimming down the recruiting, their internal recruiting team, right? So you might be dealing with a recruiter that has 15 job requisitions, right? So that might be the case. This may be a signal of some internal change. Maybe it's a change in the seniority of the definition of the job requisition, right? And so maybe that needs to be ironed out. The recruiter may be waiting on decisions from others, sort of in that vein. They might be testing your level of persistence or level of interest. Um, so suddenly these things might not be conscious, right? It just kind of happens, right? And so they might not be consciously saying, "Oh, I'm not going to respond to this person for a week," to test their persistence or perseverance. It just might play out that way as a natural course of everything else that they're doing, right? So don't assume that this is sort of a manipulative, sort of premeditated thing that the recruiter might be doing. But if you don't hear from them, it is an opportunity for you to demonstrate your persistence, right, and your sustained interest, because other candidates, if they feel like they've been ghosted, they might they might send an email or inquire, but at some point they give up, right? And I'm not saying you just keep banging your head against the wall. At some point you stop because you've gotten the signal. But anyway, these are a few things that might be happening. The recruiter may have just gone on vacation, right? This happens. Or they may no longer even be employed at the company. So this is happening. This happens, right? So these are some of the things that might be happening when you're getting quote unquote ghosted. And some ways to kind of handle this is just a follow up, right? Just put either you automate it through a scheduled email, or you just make a note for yourself on the calendar to follow up, and then just follow up with an inquiry, just expressing your sustained interest. And if there's ways that you can add value or insight to the recruiter, that might be helpful, that'll definitely catch the recruiter's eye, right? um I would definitely stay away from expressing how frustrated you might be with the process. um, there could be a time and place for that, but in the check-in email, I would sort of uh, reserve that. Um, at some point, you need to figure out whether what might be going on there, and if you still hear no, or you still hear silence out, and it could be. So I'll give you an example. This was before my recruiting days. I was a product manager in Los Angeles, and um, I was getting recruited for a product manager position here in Utah, and I interviewed. I think I had two interviews with two of the executives at that time, and then I didn't hear anything back from the recruiter or the executives for months. And this was even after I checked in and this and that, and I didn't hear anything. I mean, the first time I checked in, the recruiter just said, "Yeah, they're still trying to figure things out, blah blah blah." And then after that, I never heard anything. And then I get a call or I get an email, like months later, saying that, "Hey, you interviewed, and we want to sort of revisit the conversation." And so I find out, and eventually I ended up interviewing, getting the offer, and I took the job, which is what brought me out to Utah. But what ended up happening was that there was turnover at the executive level, and so they just didn't have their ducks in the row. And even though they were still interested in me, the hiring authority, or the person that was sort of championing for me, they just weren't ready. So the timing was on for some period of time, and then at some point something went off the rails, and the timing was off for them. And then the timing came back on. So don't entirely discount the company or the recruiter or the people there, because things could open up later on, right? And so, but if you feel that what's going on with them may be something indicative of their culture, also read that signal and take that seriously as well, right? So, for what that's worth, I see a few questions here in the chat. How many times do you think we should follow up before letting go? Um, so I call this like an exponential back off, right? So let's say you interviewed Monday, right? Maybe you check in towards the end of the week, or maybe you follow up after that interview immediately, recapping, expressing interest. And then maybe you follow up at the end of the week. Obviously, your follow up has to be sort of congruent or aligned with the expectations that the recruiter is setting with you, right? So if the recruiter says, we'll get back to you the following Monday next week, you want to keep pestering the person, right, leading up to that Monday. So you just have to kind of uh, sort of manage your follow-ups based on the expectations that they've set. But let's say that they didn't meet their expectations. I would just kind of exponentially back off your follow-ups. And what I mean by that is, just hypothetically, maybe you follow up in a week, then maybe you follow up in 2 weeks, then maybe you follow up in 3 weeks, then maybe you follow up in a month, and then maybe you follow up every month, right? And they don't have to be super thoughtful emails because I know that could take a lot of work, especially if you start going on, especially if you start going on beyond a month, right? Just make the email such that it's easy for you to write, schedule it, and really just expressing your continued interest in the opportunity, right? That goes a long way because at some point people just die out, they just stop responding altogether. But the timing could be something that could open up, and you want to stay top of mind with the recruiter. Again, if you're getting other signals that the company is chaotic or they're just, they're not the kinds of folks that you want to work with, you learn something from through some other channels, then you have to listen to that as well and sort of take everything into account. Is there a difference between internal and external recruiter when it comes to ghosting? So if an external recruiter is ghosting you, it's possible that it's possible that they don't even have a requisition, right? They might just be building a pipeline, anticipating upcoming requisitions that their firm may get. So that's again, that's speculative. It's possible. But I don't know if there's anything inherently different when it comes to ghosting between internal and external. I think ghosting is bad form, to be quite frank, and people do it, and it's unfortunate, but um, yeah. So that's one. Let's see, other opportunities. So if you're interviewing and a recruiter asks you if you have other interviews or other offers in progress, right? Um, they Again, this is not necessarily a game, but the reason that they ask this is they want to get a sense of where you are in your interviewing process, right? And because they have cohorts, that they have requisitions and they have timing that they need to manage. So hypothetically, let's say that you're talking to a recruiter, and let's say you're pretty far along in the interview process with like 2 or 3 other companies, and you just started talking to this recruiter, and they ask you, "Oh, are you considering any other opportunities?" And if you tell them about the other opportunities that you're interviewing with, which I would suggest you do, the recruiter will be like, "Oh, shoot, they they that signals to them that one, that you are probably in demand and you're a high caliber, high value candidate, and two, that if they think that there's a fit, they're going to need to try to sort of juggle their cohorts and their interviewing schedules so that they can kind of fast track you, right? And so they may be determining how quickly they need to act. And then they may be deciding on whether to they may use this information to kind of adjust their budget and their offer when it comes down to that. And so again, I would try to be transparent in terms of sharing other opportunities. I would not try to make things up either, because recruiters typically have, I mean, they're paid to kind of piece together all the information and try to take good notes, and so they're a good recruiter will always be listening to what you're saying, and they'll be using that information maybe not immediately, but maybe down the line, right? So if you make stuff up, like, oh, I have 5 other companies that I'm interviewing with and have 3 other offers, when that's not true, in fact, um, and that they'll a lot of times they'll read the signals that you might be lying, and you definitely don't want that to happen, right? So I would definitely not make stuff up. Um, all right, let's see. The lowball offer. So unfortunately, right now we're in a sort of a cycle where a lot of the companies, the employers out there have a lot of leverage. It's not always the case right now, but generally speaking, a lot of the companies out there have the leverage. And so you may go through an interview process and you may be hit with a sort of this lowball offer. What might be happening is they might be testing your negotiation skills, and it might, again, some of this stuff might not be conscious. They might be saying like, "Oh yeah, we want to test this person's negotiation skills." It might be just that they're going to offer you whatever's at the lower end of the budget, or the range, whether it was communicated to you or not, and just see what happens. Right? They might have other candidates behind you, um, and so the company might just be trying to save on compensation costs and just trying to get. I'm speculating on what might be happening here. I'm not necessarily advocating for this. And in fact, most of the clients that we work with, we advocate against lowballing because it's just not good form. And if a person accepts the offer today, their eyes might be wandering for the next 6 months, right? And so cost of hiring folks is very expensive and replacing folks. So you want to make sure that you're keeping them at least for the medium to longer term. So we always advise not to lowball. How to handle this. Negotiate confidently. You need to know your market worth, your market value. So you have to do the research, right? The other thing too is if you find in your conversation with them that it really isn't a lowball offer, that's really what they're working with. Um, Consider proposing alternative compensation components, right? That you would be happy with, right? It could be equity, perks, PTO, whatnot. The other thing too is get that in writing. Get it in writing. So if you get them to agree to something, make sure you get that as part of the offer, written as part of the offer or some sort of addendum to the offer. Um, and then be prepared to walk away if the offer doesn't meet your needs. Um, I see a few questions here, comments. Let's see, Tom. I read a social media post the other day where a candidate was told by the recruiter that it was legal to send salary numbers via email. I don't believe this is the case. What sort of game are they playing? I've never heard of that. In fact, I feel like it's going the other way around. A lot of companies now are posting their salary ranges. Um, so it sounds pretty sketch to me. I don't know. Let's see, Shayna, I've heard a lot about this in the US labor market based out of India. Thoughts on how to figure out. Yeah, so I'm not sure how it works in India, Shayna, but ideally early in the process, the recruiter, the company, and the candidate are coming to terms with there being some overlap in what's budgeted for the role and what the candidate is looking for, right? There has to be some overlap. And that's really important. And so when I'm working with a candidate, I'll ask them early on. I won't ask them what they're making, right? But I'll ask them what they're hoping to make in their next position. And so I would be prepared to try to answer that question. Um, I'm sorry. Can you give me 1 second? Okay, I'm sorry about that. Is there a common source that you use for salary data? There's a lot of there's sources out there like, is it payscale.com? Um, I did a lot of recruiting for early stage startups, and a lot of the data that you could find in some of these sources were not very helpful. There was like a lag. And also a lot of companies that I worked with were very flexible once they identified the right person that they were looking for. So um, let's see, thoughts about negotiating severance packages as part of the offer. 6 months of severance if you get laid off in 2 years. If you get laid off in 2 years. Negotiating severance packages. I haven't dealt with that much, so I can't speak too intelligently about that. I know that if you have uh, leverage, if you're a bit of a linchpin in your company, especially if you have influence with decision makers, I would definitely give it a try. Um, there's companies that are looking for people to volunteer, and if you are open to that, and you can you might be positioned to negotiate a severance that works for you in the company. So, let's see. Friendly chatter. Um, so for those of you that are interviewing, and have interviewed, depending on what kind of recruiter you may be working with, you may get a recruiter that's just super chatty, almost to the point where it's like, are we ever going to get to the interview? And so, there's a few things that might be happening here. One, they might be just trying to put you at ease, and maybe they don't have another interview after the half hour or the hour, and so they may be open to just trying to get to know you. Um, it could be that the recruiter is gathering personal information that might influence their decision. I've seen that before. Um, to some extent, I do that, right? Because I want to develop a relationship with the person. I want to get to know them because I know that that's important to the hiring manager. And I'm trying to get sort of a read on sort of the person's, how do you say, uh, ability or chemistry, right? Because that's important to the client. That's important to the hiring manager and the team. Um, it may be that the recruiter's ill prepared or inexperienced at interviewing. And so recruiters get nervous too, especially if they are new to recruiting or new to interviewing. They may be more focused on what questions they need to ask or making you feel comfortable as a candidate. It may be the fact that the recruiter may simply just need a break, right? They might have had 4, 5 back-to-back interviews right before you, and then now they just want to sort of chill out, and you just happen to be the person that they feel comfortable chilling out with and having sort of a casual conversation with. Um, the interview style may be representative of the company culture. So if you find that there's a pattern with that particular recruiter in your interaction with him or her, it may be that they value more of, can I hang out with this person, right? As a rule of thumb for whether they should continue interviewing you or even offering you the opportunity. It may be that your credentials, your experience on paper is far more, it may exceed their expectations for the role. So they maybe look at you on paper and be like, oh yeah, this person's got all the experience. I just need to know if I can hang out with this person. So that may be the case as well, right? So how to handle this? I would engage in the conversation, but I would also try to make sure that you're getting what you need out of the conversation, right? Because an interview goes both ways. Like they're interviewing you to make sure that you're a fit for them, but you should be using this opportunity in the interview to determine whether they're a fit for you, right? Do you want to continue spending time with them or pursuing them, right? So you need to have your own questions, right? And you can't spend all day talking about the weather in an interview, right? So I would engage in the conversation, but to a limit, and try to steer it to getting the questions you need answered, right? Um, and let's see, consider taking the lead in the conversation or interview, right? If you find that the interviewer, for whatever reason, is just up for a casual conversation, consider taking a lead in the conversation and maybe starting to ask your own questions, so you can start to qualify the opportunity, right? Interviews always go. There's always two components to an interview. There's the selling component, and then there's the qualification component, right? So if I'm a recruiter interviewing you as a candidate, I'm doing one of two things, and I might be doing them simultaneously, but I'm trying to qualify you, but I'm also trying to sell you on the opportunity, or at least sell you for taking the next call, taking the next interview, right? And so similarly, as a candidate, you want to be qualifying, but also selling, right? And if they're spending a bunch of time talking about the weather or things that are not directly relevant to why you're there for the interview, consider taking the lead and starting to ask your own questions and making sure you're getting the answers you need about the opportunity, right? Um, let's see. What are some methods from Jeremy? What are some methods to build a network of recruiters without seeming transactional? In other words, where do recruiters go to connect in a relaxed and professional environment? Um, where do recruiters go to connect and relax? I don't know if I have an answer for that. I mean, there are groups on like Facebook and LinkedIn where recruiters go and they trade best practices, or they talk about different ATS systems, or they just complain about this or that. You could find some of those groups, and for the ones that aren't completely discerning, you could probably get into those groups without being a recruiter, and you can probably get some insights and maybe use that as an opportunity to connect with some recruiters. The best way that I would recommend connecting with recruiters is setting up a filter or search query in LinkedIn. You could do keyword searches based on posts. So a lot of times when a recruiter is hiring, they'll post something on LinkedIn saying, "Hey, I'm hiring for this job." So you could do a query in LinkedIn based on a keyword. You can use you can keyword off of hiring. You can keyword off of hiring plus. It's like a Boolean search, right? So hiring plus, I think they use and maybe the title of the position that you're looking for. And then once you have that configured, and then you could list the names of the companies or the regions of the companies. Then you can just bookmark. You can just drag that URL once it's configured. You could drag that and you can bookmark that, in your browser. So whenever you want to do that search, you just click on the bookmark and it'll pull up that query. And then you can also sort it based on, when the post was posted. I think 24 hours or a week or a month. And so those are little things that you can do that sort of help you connect with different recruiters or people that are posting about certain things, and then engage the recruiter. Comment on their post, like it, ask thought-provoking questions. So those are some ways to engage a recruiter. But also realize that recruiters get inundated too, and a lot of times they're asked for, help me find a job. Do you know of any jobs? Do you have any leads? And so just be aware of that when you're reaching out to them, because if you're asking the same thing, just know that they probably got asked that, 5 times from other candidates, that same day. So
Thanks. I just want to kind of reiterate the question, and I appreciate the information provided.
sure.
And I'm asking specifically in terms of the exercise where we, go in the listening tour to connect with different recruiters.
Yeah.
It seems as though like cold messaging recruiters, or it just seems transact. I feel like a salesperson trying to get a hold of a recruiter just to build like a connection and relationship. Kind of in the example you use, maybe there's a job that they posted that I'm not ready for or don't want, but I know that they recruit very high skilled people, and I want to kind of build that network. So I'm just curious if you've ever been reached out to in a very unique way that has made you want to connect with that person maybe down the road, or build a relationship that is fruitful in any way.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you have to look at what recruiters are interested in, right? I mean, most recruiters are interested in the immediate, which is I need a candidate or set of candidates for the roles that I'm looking to fill today, right? And so, so that's what they're looking for in the short term. In the medium to longer term, depending on whether they're internal recruiter or external recruiter be interested in, especially if they're full desk, meaning they're in charge for not just filling the positions, but they're also in charge of um, uh, procuring new requisitions, soliciting new clients. If they're full desk, right, then they want exposure. They want access to new clients, right? They want access to prospective clients, new prospective clients. So if you can give them any sort of leads in that vein, that's valuable to them, right? And that'll get their attention. Maybe a little bit different for internal recruiters because they're not necessarily looking for new clients per se, right? But but yeah, I just know that recruiters are, especially right now, I mean, there's a lot of recruiters that are out of work, and the other recruiters that are not out of work, they're slammed, right? Um, if I had a magic wand, I wish I could have, an opportunity out there for everybody that reached out to me, but that's not the case. So just know that in terms of tempering your expectations when you're reaching out to recruiters. But if there's a way that you can add value to them, um, whether in the short term or the long term, and sort of presenting that as such, that would be really helpful. That would get people's attention because I'll give you just to give you a sense of like most people approach me and they approach recruiters asking for a coffee, right? And that's why I do this, right? Because I can talk to more folks and hopefully add more value at scale, right? And so just know that a lot of recruiters get approached with that, and if you could step to them with something different, more unique that adds value, you're more likely to catch their eye, right? Um, the endless interview process. So I'm encountering this more often with people that I'm talking with, is that like there's almost there's some indeterminate number of interviews or rounds, right? There's no clear end in sight. And sometimes they're interviewing 1 week and then maybe there's another interview in 3 weeks, and it's just really frustrating, right? And so what might be happening on the other side is that the company might be super indecisive, right? They might not even know what they're looking for, right? Especially if this is a new hire or a new role at the company, they might be sampling and shopping across the talent market to see what the market will sustain. Also, and I've seen this firsthand, where if it's a company's first time hiring for a particular position and they don't really know what they're looking for, each person that they talk to provides input to them where they're actually refining the job description or the role as they talk to more people in the marketplace. I mean, so for example, like they might find that they didn't budget enough. They might find that they don't need a product manager, they need a senior product manager, right? And now they have to go back and maybe, get approval for more, for more budget. And so that might be what is happening, right? It could also be a stalling tactic while they dive deeper with other candidates in a given cohort, right? So these are some of the things that might be happening on the back end. The way I would handle this is I would ask for clarity around the stages in the timeline. I would ask very directly. And if they can't give it to you, right, I would try to get a better understanding of what might be happening on the behind the scenes. Um, and it may just be the case, again, this has to do with leverage, right? Because if you don't have anything else going on, then you're almost compelled in some ways to be sort of infinitely patient with the company. And I know that could be really frustrating. Um, but yeah, I think to the extent that you can really try to get more information from the recruiter about what might be going on behind the scenes, then you can manage your expectations more effectively. Let's see. Oh, we're at 39. Okay. So I'll just cover maybe one or two more of these, and then we can talk a little bit about any other questions you guys might have. And I'll send you a link to this deck. It's by no means exhaustive, but at least kind of gives you a sense of, what again, what patterns you might start to identify and what might be happening, and then kind of how to proceed from there. So the pressure play, right? I think, maybe some of you guys have seen this is a recruiter will come in with an offer, verbal, usually verbal, and they will try to close you right then and there, right? And there may be a sort of a pressure thing going on. And the reason recruiters do this, right, is one, they may be really incentivized to close you so that they can log that commission or they can put that requisition to bed, right? It's not, again, I'm not saying that this is good form, but it happens, right? And so you have to understand what might be happening, right? So they might want to close a position quickly for whatever reason. Maybe they just want to log the commission. Maybe it could be any number of reasons in that sense, right? Um, the other thing that might be happening is they might sense some hesitation on your part. So if you signal hesitation, maybe because they were able to tease out of you that you're interviewing with two other companies, and that you are, that this company is second in line to the other company, right? If they feel like that, or if they get that sense, they might be pushing you to sort of go yes or no. And they might be pushing you to do that sooner rather than later because they might have a candidate that's maybe just as strong right behind you. And maybe they're concerned about losing that second candidate if you say no. Right. So these are some of the things that might be happening if they're pressuring you. Some ways to handle this. Try to reassure your recruiter that you have a sustained level of interest and excitement for the role, right? So when you're telling them, if this is the case, that you're interviewing with other companies, you don't want to give them the signal that, oh yeah, I'm interviewing with other companies and I'd much prefer go with them. You guys are my third choice, right? That may be the truth, but you still want to showcase like why you're interested in the company and sort of highlight that. So I'm not telling you to fib or to lie, but you want to highlight why you're interested in the company and really emphasize why you're interested in them and where you could see it being a great career move for you to move into that position with that company. And in your mind, even though they are a third, you still want to emphasize, what you're excited about with that company, right? So you don't want to give them any reason to suspect that you're if an offer comes out that you're going to say no, right? It's more like if an offer came out, I'm going to say yes, but this is what I'm going to need, right? And that could be compensation, it could be title, it could be whatever, resources or whatnot, right? So, yeah, I said here, communicate in advance that you're interviewing with other companies. I would do that, but I would also ask for the same transparency in return from the recruiter with respect to other candidates, with respect to other competing candidates. So, I'm going to tell you as a candidate, yeah, I'm interviewing with two other companies. Oh, and by the way, how many other folks are in this cohort I may be competing with, right? So feel free to ask that of the recruiter, right? If you're going to be transparent with them, they should be transparent with you. And this is how I do it as a recruiter. I'm transparent with them. I'll tell them that there's two other um, in the cohort that they're going up against. If there's nobody else, I'll tell them you're leading the way, but we are, there's other folks behind you that are, lagging in the process that we're engaging, right? So if you're going to trade your transparency, don't be hesitant to ask for their transparency as well. Let's see, request additional time to consider the offer. This is always appropriate if you need the time. It's a big decision, so don't be pressured into making a big decision like overnight. So when you ask for additional time, be certain about the time that you need. Like if you need another week, make sure you ask for it, but also be able to tell them like what you're going to do in that week, right? Well, I need to talk to my spouse. I need to, wrap up these other interviews. I need to do this, whatever. Make sure that the time that you're asking for is not completely arbitrary, right? And it has to be realistic, right? Otherwise, the recruiter will get the sense that you're just trying to bide your time because you're waiting for something else to materialize. right? And then once they agree to that time, make sure you deliver on that. Because if you keep dragging it on, you'll lose credibility, and I've seen offers rescinded. And so just because an offer is extended doesn't mean they can't rescind it. So just be careful of that. Okay, I'll touch on this one because I think this one is a little bit, it's kind of it's common right now. There's a lot of great talent out there, and there's a lot of great talent out there that are open to, well, open to taking a lateral, but also open to taking maybe a step back or step down with respect to scope or title or role. And so the overqualification sort of feedback is concerning. So it can happen at any time in the process, right? So let's say early in the process, somebody's looking at your resume and maybe they're talking with you, and they might be they see director, VP, VP in terms of your career history, and then now you're interviewing for a director level position, right? So the question is going to come up like, why are you interviewing for a director level position? You might be overqualified for this position. And so the concern, right, is that you'll be leaving quickly for another opportunity, right? Um, the other concern is I've heard the overqualification the overqualification feedback as sort of a cop out for being like they just want somebody that is younger, that doesn't have sort of higher expectations with respect to compensation. So I've heard that sort of given as feedback. Um, and so yeah, I mean, in terms of how to deal with this, you have to be honest with yourself in terms of what kind of position you will be open to taking, right? I know that right now folks may be sort of economically, financially pressed to find a position. And if you really genuinely are open to taking a position that's, a bit lower in terms of scope or title, responsibility, or compensation, you have to be honest with yourself that you're in fact okay with that, or at least for some period of time. Um, I would also try to emphasize your interest in terms of how your experience adds value, and kind of why, having a reasonable story of why you would take a position that is, what seems to be lower from your existing career trajectory. One common explanation that I hear is that, it might be in a new industry, a company in a new industry, right? And so you're open to taking a step back, so to speak, so that you can transition into a new industry, right? So it has to be, plausible and realistic, and it should be genuine coming from you, right? So and then, obviously reaffirming your long-term commitment to the position, the industry, ultimately the company, is something that they would be looking for. So anyway, I'm going to stop there. There's a bunch of other slides that I have. I'm going to share this via email with everyone, so you can kind of take a look at the other ones. Again, this is not by any means intended to be exhaustive. I would love any questions, follow-on questions that you might have. Email me if you have any questions about any of these sort of games or patterns. But right now, I'll just sort of open it up to sort of general questions here to the top of the hour. I see a bunch of questions coming up in here on the chat. Let's see, where do I start? Let's see, is it really a firm decision if they're not giving you the offer in writing? So what I would do whenever you get an offer verbally, um, I would ask them for a written offer. Some recruiters wait for a verbal yes or verbal commitment before extending a written offer. But what I would answer that is I would tell them that you're very interested in this opportunity. Uh, from what I'm hearing, everything sounds good, but I need something that I can look at on paper, right? Um, and then again, anything that you feel that you discussed throughout the process that is part of the offer, make sure that it gets in there in writing. Don't be afraid for them to get that in writing. I've seen too many situations where something was discussed and somehow the hiring manager just forgets about it, and then the new hire is completely bummed out 6 months later when they're like, "Oh, I thought we talked about this," you know. So get it in writing. Um, Jaime, maybe I'll look at doing part two of these games. I think it could be an interesting. Uh, so I'll send this out. I would love to hear, email me if you have any questions, or maybe there's some patterns or games that you guys have seen that maybe I didn't list in here, and I'd love to talk with you guys more about it. Oh yeah, sorry, I'll stop sharing screen here. Let's see. Liza, you have a question about the overqualification.
Yeah, if I can,
Go
I
for
just
it.
these are so it's a situation I'm in right now. It's not exactly, well, kind of similar. So it's a startup, I think Series C. They've been around for 10 years. They used to have a marketing, so I'm a marketer and a founder. And so they used to have a marketing team. Something hasn't worked out of like I think head of marketing was too junior. So now it's much smaller, like say out of 10, 5 marketers, and they put them into like under product, under data, right? And then they just posted a job, which was like legit a pretty junior job, but I kind of was connected to the CEO, so I mailed her. They put me into the process. The hiring manager literally told me, "You're the most interesting candidate we have." I'm basically talking to the C-suite, and at the same time, they're like, "Oh, like you threw a wrench into our hiring process. Like we need to decide what is it that we want. Do we want like a senior person who can do everything, or like we should be hiring the junior person? And if and when you're going to decide that this is too boring for you?" And I told them, like, I'm a founder. I've done everything like myself. Like I'd like a focus. I'd like to like raise a lot of strategic things here to deal with, right? I don't mind at all like doing the tactical things as well. But I'm just wondering like what's my way of like having, because like part of it me think like they're not sure what they want, like legitimately not sure what they want. They're not playing a game with me. I get it. But like how do I in a way lead these conversations? Because I honestly feel that I have a better understanding now, especially that I spoke to them a few times, what I can deliver and what they may need versus
Yeah.
the
Do you have a line of communication with the hiring authority, the one of the executives, or is all your communication going through the recruiter?
So I spoke, I have all of their emails, and I don't know exactly how they make the decision. So the hiring manager is the head of communications, but also like this used to report to the CEO. So I don't know if they all like make a decision together ultimately, or he is the one making the decision. I have all their emails. They did tell me like
Yeah.
reach out. So I just yeah, like so
So
in the short, yes, kind of.
yeah. So what I'm hearing with the company is that they don't necessarily know what they're looking for.
Yeah.
It's a common problem, right? And if you can take sort of a consultative approach to working with the decision makers and
Hmm.
consulting with them and helping them think through this, right? Then you set yourself apart. You're
Hmm.
no longer a candidate. I mean, yes, you're still a candidate, but you're more than that now. Like you're a partner already with them in terms of solving their problem, right? And if you
Yeah, so
can
I think
position
they
yourself like
already,
that,
yeah. They hire, my interview experience has been like pretty strange because they don't really ask me any questions except for like how would you like go about this, or like it's already been a little bit of this, and I think they openly admitted they're like a little out of their depth here.
yeah,
So should I, and that's kind of like another kind of related question that I have, and I think in Never Search Alone book in the chapters on interviewing, it says like work closely with your recruiter, like after every interview, do kind of like postmortem. And so I'm wondering, does that kind of also apply to the internal recruiters? And should I be in touch with her and be like, look, like what is going on? Like, like what's the process? Like, what is each of those people exactly looking for? Like, could you tell me rather than I did ask her. I was like, and she just said, oh, next interview is a person X. And I honestly don't even know why I talked to him because he doesn't seem to be in the line of like the main person this role will like. So should I be just like, can we have 15 minutes? Could you tell me who makes the decision so that
Yeah. A lot of good questions there. So I'll try to unpack this. So, look at who the recruiter is. If they're senior, you could probably rely on more intelligent, more creative, solution-oriented discussions with that person. If they're more junior, they might have a difficult time helping you navigate that whole process, right? If they're internal, well, whether they're internal or external, they both have an incentive to fill the position, right? If it's an internal junior recruiter, they may be over their head. They may be in over their head in terms of helping you navigate the process, right? This is what we do when we come in. Like seeking alignment across executives is not easy, right? A junior recruiter is not going to be able to do that very effectively, right? A senior recruiter may be able to do that, right? And so getting everyone in the same room, getting alignment, helping them navigate, helping them make a decision, right? It's like a complex enterprise level sales process in some cases, especially if it's a high level position. And so if you can, so part of it too is like you have to evaluate the company. Like if you're really you're learning a lot in this process, and if you still have the appetite to join a company that is this chaotic, then great. But if you don't, then maybe read the signals and listen to them and listen to what the company is telling you indirectly, and say no and move on, right? The last thing you want to do as a job seeker is pour all your energy into, how do you say, into false positives, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I mean, I am being kind of like in the kind of like information gathering for having these conversations, but I guess like just the last thing that it's in my like rights or what that, like, I know rights not the right word, but I could reach out to the recruiter and ask for 15 minutes. And at the very least, I want to ask how these decisions are made. Like, is this like a hiring manager decision or is it a C-suite big decision? Because like,
I think those are legitimate questions. I think those are legitimate questions, and they should be able to answer those questions, especially if they've hired before, right? If the recruiter's been around, if they've hired before, they should know how the decisions are made, right? And they should be able to help you navigate it to that extent.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
Sure. Let's see. Question from Leslie. What if they say they have one salary regardless of location, given they are virtual? Is there a good way to argue cost of living needs to be considered in this market? So Leslie, this kind of goes to sort of the leverage question, right? So let's say they are, I don't know, let's say the company's in Salt Lake City and you're in Los Angeles, hypothetically, and they have, one salary, and they're not trying to adapt the salary to cost of living depending on where the person may be. It also depends on where you are in the process, right? So if you are far along in the process, let's say you have the offer. So now it's just a matter of negotiation, right? And so, but if you're early in the process and you feel like, they have one salary, and because of your cost of living, depending on wherever you live, that there's no overlap between their salary range and your comp expectation. If there's no overlap, then it might be sort of a moot at that point, right? And so they just may be constrained. So, but if you're far along the process, there may be room for negotiation. So, thanks, Shannon. Thanks, Liza. All right, I think that's all I have for this week, you guys. I appreciate you guys showing up and engaging and putting your questions in. And I will I will send this out in the follow-up email, and based on the feedback that I get, I will consider just sort of doing part 2 of this. And hope you guys have a great week, and I will talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.